Welcome to the Letters to Our Unborn Children podcast. I'm Sarah.
And I'm Tara.
This is the podcast companion to our collaborative, research-based visual arts project by the same name that began in January of 2024 to explore a woman's decision not to have children in this lifetime through a unique lens.
If you could have a conversation with the children you decided not to have, what would you say to them? We asked survey participants to answer this question by writing a letter to their unborn, never born children. Using these anonymous letters, we created 12 large paintings representing letters from 12 archetypal would-be mothers.
This mini-series podcast will dive further into the project with conversations about our creative process and research, as well as interviews with women who were involved in the survey and the private video chat group community, as well as women who have been doing work in this community for a while that have inspired us along the way. To learn more about this project, go to letterstoourunbornchildren.com.
Dear Unborn, reparenting my inner child is the work I'm meant to do in this lifetime. I'm still learning how to love and nurture myself. I recognize and acknowledge the very real rebirth of my own inner children, and I love the time and energy I have to parent them. Each of us has a child within to connect to. I want to celebrate that, to reparent myself and heal my inner child. I am so proud of you and your courage to be born to yourself. It's okay. You're okay. You'll be okay. Nothing is unfigure-outable. You are loved. Love, Inner Mother.
I love that one so much.
I do too. And that's one of the ones that you're doing. So it's like I haven't read it for a really long time.
Yeah. Oh, they're so good. So this episode, sort of the theme is the inner parent. And we have some really great guests today for this one. But before we get into that, let's talk a little bit about this, the archetype, how this letter came to be. We already know, we've already shared the process of how we put these together. But the inner parent was one that I feel like going into it, you and I having such similar paths around this topic felt pretty strongly about, I feel like, and I'll share a little bit on that and you can too. But I was surprised by how many other women also were like on this journey. And so the archetype of the inner parent represents an aspect of the psyche that takes on the role of a nurturing, protective, and guiding figure towards one's own self, particularly towards the inner child. Some of the highlights about this one are nurturance and care, protection and safety, guidance and wisdom, setting boundaries, discipline, healing generational wounds, integration and wholeness, a voice of inner authority, and parenting the inner child. Wow, wow, wow.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel all of these things are work that both you and I have done actively and have been doing. And for me, through recovery, through therapy, largely for me through recovery, and especially with parenting the inner child, integration, and healing generational wounds. And I was surprised too by how many other women involved in this project, how that was part of their letter that they wrote anonymously for the survey. And these letters, of course, are anonymous, so we don't know who who wrote these letters. But certainly not everyone involved in this project is in some kind of recovery program. So it's a thing. It's a thing just beyond the scope of my narrow perspective, my small perspective, and worldview. So the inner parent really does play, it seems to really play a role for a lot of women, either consciously or subconsciously, but it seems like in this project, consciously, it really plays a role in that decision to not have a kid, to not bring children into this world.
Yeah, I think a lot of people in the Marco Polo group and you and I have discussed the fact that working on yourself, going into therapy, getting into other recovery programs out there that are helping people kind of figure out how to stand on their own 2 feet and support themselves and detach with love and set boundaries and all these things. Um, or even anyone that's trying to seek wholeness through any other path, religious path, spirituality, meditation. It takes so much time and energy. And I feel like a big sentiment was I could either keep trying to work on myself and help myself as much as I can, but kind of put that on the back burner, bring some people into the world, try to make sure that they're okay, raise them up, and then hopefully at some point pick back up a little bit where I left off. Or I could forego that whole thing and just keep really staying committed to my own healing. And then when you look at it from the perspective of to end generational trauma, especially before bringing in anybody else that I could potentially accidentally pass that trauma on to, um, that seems to be a big part of it. Like there's sort of a fork in the road. Do I stay on with myself here? For me, I mean, this was, yeah. I mean, when I first learned about inner child work and reparenting and inner parenting, it was mind blowing because that's what I needed. I needed a path towards learning how to be a grown up and how to take care of myself and how to give myself the things that I never received, which isn't anybody's fault. I had to like really do a lot of uncovering and getting out of like feelings of anger and resentment and shame and blame and all these things. And that is still, I mean, it's probably a lifelong thing I'll be doing. Um, but that was such a huge breakthrough for me and realizing, oh, I can give this to myself. That's exciting. I was so excited to sort of have like childhood 2.0, while also being an adult. So I think for me, it was like, oh, I don't have time to, to, to I don't have time to offer another person right now. I really want to cut this thing out and get it out of me. And then, ironically is I feel that I am healing generational wounds and I have done some really great work and I have transformed in so many ways. And now I'm not going to get to pass that on to anyone genetically. But I also feel like the risk is too high for me that it would go in the other direction that I'm like, I'm fine. Let's just end it here. Let's trim this. I think this is one of the paintings. Let's trim this branch from the family tree.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm reminded of a few things. Um, I'm reminded of adult children of alcoholics and dysfunctional families. And I'm reminded of this image that's in the literature. It talks a lot about, and you deal with a lot of the generational baggage. And there's this image, you're in your mind's eye, looking behind you and seeing this long generational line of people just like with a rucksack, or like a big bag, like a big heavy bag, and then just passing it on, passing it on, passing it on. And then I get that bag passed to me of all that generational junk. And it's compounded over the years, but with this inner journey, this inner healing work, inner child work, inner parenting work, I can decide to put that bag down. And it's not mine to carry anymore. And because I don't have kids, like you were saying too, I have the luxury of setting down that bag. And I have the luxury of having the time and the energy of having one thing that you and I have talked about is we have the time and luxury of living an examined life rather than like a quantified life. And this was something that came up in the research too. Like I have the luxury and the choice to live a life of self-reflection, thinking, philosophy, healing. It is a luxury, and I realize that, and I'm so thankful for it. And then the other thing I thought of is I'm thinking about when self-help and that whole sort of vibe kind of exploded, right? And it was in the 60s and 70s, right? With the baby boomers, like with the people our parents' age, bless them. And and so we have now had three generations of consciousness raising with civil rights, um, psychoanalysis, like the development of that field, self-help, etc. So we have had over the last three generations like this increased awareness of and participation in reparenting and an increased awareness of the impact of like intergenerational trauma and wanting to heal from it personally and collectively. And actually, one of the books that we used in our research, Ruby Warrington's The Women Without Kids book that came out last year, she calls this what we're in now, like this huge declining birth rate thing, a birth strike. She calls it a collective birth strike, and she says the mass rejection of procreating is a collective rejection of our collective emotional inheritance. We're ready to put a stop to the suffering experienced by women, mothers, and children under patriarchy. And yeah, maybe that's the huge part of what we're seeing.
It's so good. It's so good. So we have pulled a couple of women that were in the Marco Polo group to share with us today their perspectives on all of this, their experience being part of this project, writing this letter to their unborn children. It's such a great conversation. Can't wait for you to listen to it. I got so much out of it. I know we both did. So here we are. Let's talk to Erin and Danielle. Well, thank you both for being here. We're so excited to have you. This is going to be such an interesting conversation. The inner parent is the archetype that we're talking about in this episode, and so we'll see where the conversation takes us. But the first thing I wanted to ask was just to have each of you tell us briefly who you are and what you do and how you got involved with the Letters Project. So, Erin, let's start with you.
Hi, I'm Erin Watt. And what do I do? Good question. Well, professionally, I am a holistic relationship coach. So, this is a great topic for me because a lot of what I teach clients is how to become a conscious inner parent. So, I'm really excited to talk about that. But also, I've had my own journey with that. And then I got involved in this project because I am good long term friends with Sarah Saturday. And I think she's open about her recovery journey. So we're in that together. And of course, I've met Tara as well, and I know Danielle. So anyway, I'm really glad to be here.
Hi, I'm Danielle Shields. Thank you all so much for having me today. It is really an honor to be with the three of you women. I, in my past life, quote unquote, I was a mental health therapist for about 9 years. I worked with different populations within that time, but about, I guess 9 years ago, maybe a little over 9 years ago, I transitioned into photography. So I'm a full-time photographer, business owner, and I really like to infuse kind of some of the mental health into my sessions. So even though I don't practice mental health anymore, that's certainly still a big part of my life and a part of my personal journey story. I have known Sarah and Tara for many, many years, and Erin too. I feel like maybe what, 12, 13 years at this point, something like that. So, yeah, that's how I'm here and how I'm in the mix.
Awesome. So you both filled out the survey and have been in the Marco Polo group. I know more active sometimes than others, but we were first of all curious, just what was your experience with writing the letter to your unborn children? Danielle, let's start with you.
Well, I loved the prompt. I had never really thought about writing a letter to my unborn child before. And then when I started, it just opened up so much for me. It felt very cathartic. It felt very affirming. It really helped me understand why that was the choice that I kind of made. Um, and yeah, it was just a really beautiful experience, kind of thinking about how I can still mother, I can still love, I can still nurture, and I don't need a tiny little human being in my hands in order to do that. And I think that the process of writing that letter really exposed that for me.
That's beautiful. Erin, what about you?
So I feel like I'm not alone in this perspective, but I almost didn't even know I needed the prompt and didn't even know I needed the group in this project because I am someone who deeply explores like all aspects of my psyche, but I really didn't think that this was an aspect that I needed to explore. So when I started to write the letter, I can be a little bit overly literal sometimes. I was like, "Oh, this is kind of silly, but I love Sarah, so I'm going to do it." And then honestly, the depth of what I was being asked to do didn't really hit me until later and until I joined the Marco Polo group, which again, I kind of just did because I love Sarah and I love all of you. But I mean, literally, I was like, oh, this is really cool. Sarah's doing this. She always has cool ideas. I'm just going to do this and see what happens. So it's not that I didn't have an impactful experience writing the letter, but I honestly didn't think too much about it. I would say for me, it's unfolded more over time and connecting with people and being like, oh my goodness, I didn't even know I had grief around this because my decision to not have children has been so firm for so long. And I've been grieving and dealing with so many other things that this almost felt like an irrelevant topic, but I'm going to show up and participate and see what happens. And I've been blown away at the impact that this group has had and the timing. And this is not the right podcast episode to talk about this, but I've been through a lot around my body and I had a hysterectomy and all this stuff. So I didn't even know that was going to happen when I started this journey with you guys. So yeah, this group has really surprised me and been very supportive and helpful in ways that I didn't even know I was missing support and help.
Yeah, that's something that we've talked about so much. And Tara and I just like it just keeps coming up. Like we didn't know we needed a space and how many people needed a space. Um, and I guess Tara, I want to pass the ball to you a little bit. And just talking about what we've seen with this idea of making this choice not to bring new people into the world because we want to focus so much on our own healing and parenting ourselves. So I don't know if Tara, you want to start by just sharing what you've observed or yourself experienced through this, realizing how many women are really focused on their own healing and having that be part of the decision not to have children.
Sure. So I will briefly share my own experience first and then what I've observed since being in this group. So, my experience with inner parenting has really only happened consciously within the last couple of years. And I didn't really know that that was something I even needed. Um, I knew that there were parts of me that felt inaccessible to me, and parts of me that had been abandoned by myself. um, but when I started recovery, that was when and therapy too, that was when I really started digging into that stuff. And since Sarah brought the idea of this project to me, Erin, similar to you, I was like, well, yeah, this sounds cool. Okay, let's do it. And the more Sarah and I talked about it, and the more the project progressed and like the ball got rolling, but the more surprised I became, like, oh my gosh, there's a lot here. And I would have never thought that. So that has been really such a joy to connect with some of these women who've been involved in this project and to just kind of um, reach into that more, explore that more in a different way within myself. It's been it's just been really, well, a lot of things. There's been grief, there's been joy, there's been surprise, discovery, all of these things. But I wanted to ask you all about your inner parenting journeys because I know there are similarities and I know that there are huge differences. So, Erin, we'll start with you. Could you just share a little bit about that inner parenting experience for you?
Yeah, thank you. Um, I'm honored to share about this. It's such a long journey, I will say, because I'll start by saying I got sober pretty young. So I was 24. And I think that was probably the first thing I ever did that was what could be called inner parenting. I did not know that at the time. I just knew that I couldn't keep going the way I was going. And it was about 5 years into recovery that I joined a 12-step group called Adult Children of Alcoholics and Dysfunctional Homes. And I will just say that nothing in my life has been the same since I discovered what dissociation was and realized that I had never actually felt a feeling in real time. So I feel like if I could summarize what inner parenting has been, it's been creating systems and support outside of myself and within myself that have allowed me to become aware, validate, and give permission to feel, and then get the support that I need from there. And it's such a complicated, nuanced journey. I would say neglect is probably the hardest thing that I have had to recover from. And I feel like that's true even for my clients and most people I know. When I look at like the traumatic things that happened, it's like I can do certain work around that and find ways to express and feel that. But pervasive emotional neglect has been the number one thing that I feel like I will be reparenting parts of me around that for the rest of my life. Like even this morning, I had to start work at 8 and I was feeling really run down. I actually chose to cancel an appointment with a client to get back into bed for an hour. And while that doesn't seem like that big of a deal, as someone who was not believed when she was sick, was ignored and punished and shamed and ridiculed for feeling anything but perfect and productive, that was a huge inner parenting moment for me this morning to just sit with myself and go, okay, I can give myself an hour to just slow down and acknowledge that I don't feel great. And the rest of my day has gone really well. And I wouldn't have thought that with the way I felt when I woke up. So that's just like a small example of inner parenting and how it's been everything from like setting huge boundaries and getting rid of toxic people in my life and, reevaluating the way I eat and sleep and function and do things for myself all the way to, oh, could it be okay to just cancel an appointment and get back into bed for an hour when I wake up feeling run down? So that for me has been a very long and winding journey towards understanding and implementing inner parenting tools.
I love that. I love that. And I think what I love about this panel that we have today is that we all four have come to this idea of inner parenting from different places. And a few of us are in recovery actively. All of us have done therapy, some coaching, some other kind of self-help, self-healing things along the way. And also I'm excited to see like so much more out in the world about this topic. I mean, you've got internal family systems is becoming like a well-known therapeutic modality. There's so much on social media, people just constantly talking about this stuff. It's just getting out there in whole new ways. It's no longer like this, what are you talking about inner parenting? But at the same time, I think probably a lot of people are still like, wait, what do you mean by that? So continuing to Danielle, what's been your experience and what have been the most helpful tools for you, especially thinking about the fact, that you lost your mom when you were young and how you've, continued to provide that parenting for yourself.
Yeah, thank you. Gosh, truly, this is just such an important thing to talk about and share and just put out there in the world, certainly. I, like many people, I spent the first part of my life really looking outside of myself for answers, outside of myself for regulation, outside of myself for comfort, outside of myself for validation. And then there was a shift at some point, and I honestly don't really know when that shift happened, but it kind of came to me where it was like the outside world is really unpredictable. You can't rely on it that much. You can't control other people. You can't control outside circumstances. And so how am I going to regulate and feel safe within? And really the biggest thing that's really helped me with that is inner parenting. Being able to tell myself the things that I wish the world were telling me, that I wish a healthy parent were telling me. Being able to say, you're okay right now in this moment. You're safe. Even if you don't feel safe, you are safe. I am with you. I will never abandon you. We will get through this together. And kind of turning that inward has really just impacted my life in so many ways that I didn't even know were possible. Losing a parent at a young age was very challenging. And so I quite literally at that point did not have, my mother was a safe person for me. Definitely there were dynamics there that, there is no dynamic that's perfect. But she was no longer a sounding board. And so it was kind of like, all right, well, what would she tell you in this moment? And could you tell yourself this in this moment, kind of a thing?
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I think one thing that I don't know if I was surprised by this, but the fact that we ended up with an entire archetype called the inner parent, just shows how many women are thinking about this stuff when they're trying to make the decision. I mean, so many beautiful things came through on those surveys about just, I'm choosing myself in this lifetime. Like, I'm choosing to focus on, giving myself the childhood I didn't receive, or, healing myself. It sounds like, obviously, the survey is anonymous, so we don't know exactly what you all wrote. Hopefully some of your words ended up on some of the paintings somewhere, maybe on the inner parent. I'm sure that the sentiment came through for both of you. But yeah, how do you feel like now, having done the survey and feeling maybe having some more awareness around your decision through this process and your own process, do you feel like the work of reparenting yourself plays a big role in your decision? Erin, start with you.
Oh, yeah. I've been super clear for a long time that there was my brain is very much about like, yes, I'm creative, but I also have kind of this literal efficiency focused brain all the time. And there were so many days I would wake up and I'd be like, can you imagine a child being on top of all of this shit that you're dealing with on a daily basis? And, unlike Danielle, I did not have mature, healthy parents. In fact, I had very little conscious adult energy around me growing up. And what that resulted in was not just like stress and horrible traumatic things happening, but even just like my health being neglected. And so much of my adult life has been, how do I just function at a baseline of health and balance, and the energy and money and time that has been required to get myself to just not be in chronic pain and exhaustion while being able to create financial stability for myself. I could not imagine adding in more, like a whole being that is dependent on me. Like, there are times having a cat felt like too much, which I'm so grateful for my pets. I'm not, throwing shade at that, but parenting my pets was enough, for me. And so I say all this to say, I may have not always had the language that I was inner parenting and therefore wasn't having children, but I was always aware that having children was an unrealistic and untenable choice, because what I was never going to do was bring a child into the world that I couldn't take care of and that I would have neglected. And I also knew that maybe now it feels like a more uncompromising choice that I'm going to put myself first, but I knew there was no feasible pathway where I could take care of myself and another being. So it absolutely was, I would say, the number one reason I never wanted to have children was that I couldn't see like the strategist archetype that I think we recently talked about, like from a strategic perspective, like let's take out all the emotion. I was like, this literally doesn't make sense. And until someone can show me that it would make sense, I'm not even gonna, consider having children. So I hope
Yep.
that answers your
Oh,
question.
yeah. And Danielle, same question to you. And I know that for a time you were maybe open to trying. And how much of this idea of putting the focus back on yourself and letting go of the idea of having children, like what was your experience there, solidifying that, and has inner parenting played a role in that for you?
Yeah. So I spent probably my mid to late 30s obsessing over whether or not I should have a child. I could never say yes. I could never say no. I was straight down the middle, freaking out. And it's like the time is ticking, like you're getting closer to 40. You got to make this decision now. You can't push this aside anymore. So, and thankfully I have a partner who was on the same page. I can't say enough about that, how grateful I am for that experience also. We were both really like, we don't know, should we, shouldn't we? So we decided, let's just try and see if it happens. And if it does, great, we'll head down that path. If it doesn't happen, great, we will not do anything further to make that happen. And it didn't happen. And when I turned 40, I gave myself permission to say, that's it. I'm not trying anymore. And at that point where I gave myself permission to say, no, I don't want this, I don't want to try anymore, I can't begin to tell you the relief that I felt within my body. It was literally like letting go of something that I had been clinging to for so long. And as time has passed, I'm about to be 43, so we're talking 3 years now in this space. I think that probably the answer was always no for me, and that the struggle was really not being able to identify that internal answer, feeling very pressured by society, feeling like I was going to be making the wrong decision, feeling like, well, who's going to take care of me when I'm older? Will I ever really truly know love if I'm not a parent? All of these questions swarming around. And with 3 years of perspective, I realized that a lot of those questions aren't even my own. They're just societally shoved into my little head. And there's no shame in that. I think it's great to ask questions. I think it's great to grow perspective. But sitting here right now, I just feel very grateful that was not my experience, and that we were not able to conceive a child. I spent, again, the first part of my life, and even now I still struggle with codependency and trying to regulate other people and regulate situations so that I feel comfortable. And really, there is no greater experience of that than when you have a kid, like teaching them how to do that. And it's like, I'm trying to teach myself how to do that. I don't know that I can take on the responsibility of a little person as well. So yeah, that's where I am with that.
That's great. And a lot of what has come up through this is the idea of what is a mother. And a part of that, this idea of maternal instinct, which through our research we have discovered is actually a myth. I did not know that. So this final question is sort of, maybe Tara, you can kick off what we've learned about, what we've been told about being a mother, having maternal instinct, and then how we're hoping this project can help people, anyone, redefine what is a mother. Do I have a mother within me? How do I show mothering and this idea of maternal instinct?
Yeah. So one thing that I always kind of instinctively knew was bullshit was that the maternal myth was, well, bullshit. But in my mind, because we've been so culturally conditioned in my mind, and also this has to do with my background too. Well, I must be wrong about that. I'm probably wrong about that because I'm hearing so many things telling me that this is a thing. I'm a woman. I'm supposed to naturally want to be a mother. Um, so, and this maternal instinct topic we've talked about on the private chat Marco Polo group, and was one of the things that we've researched and have indeed found that it is a myth, and it's been going on well relatively recently in our society. I mean, I say recently, like over the last 200 years, but kind of flared up again in the 70s, the 60s and 70s. And historically, a lot of women were starting to work outside the home. Birth control was more readily accessible than it had been. So women were having more choices. And so, yeah, there was a flare up of maternal instinct, lots of articles. There was one in particular written in, I think, 1973, written by a man. But lots of literature, scientific literature, and I say that in quotes, saying that it is a thing. But we know it's not, and we know that when anybody, men, women, the whole spectrum, when anybody sees a little cute little baby or holds a cute little baby, those same sorts of hormones get put out throughout your body and they make you feel good. Um, but learning that and thinking about what is a mother, what does that even mean? What is a mother versus what is mothering? What is nurturing? What are your thoughts? Well, now I'm trying to think of the question. What are your thoughts on all of that? Danielle, take it away.
I love it. Also such a good question. So I think that, yeah, basically what you said, like, I don't know that this internal nurturing experience is specific to women, especially as we learn more about gender fluidity and things like that. Like, why would we say that it's just a maternal instinct? That's so unfair to all humans. I think that I have an abundance of internal instinctual nurturing energy. And what I realize the older I get too is that, like, I can shift that maternal instinct, quote unquote, onto so many different things: caring for our planet, helping to care and nurture friendships. I have many wonderful women in my life that do have children. I love their children so much. They're such a gift in my life. And I see my friends' struggles with that. And I have the capacity and the time to help to support and love and nurture them. When sometimes it's hard for them to do that for themselves because they're actively trying to mother and nurture and love their children. So I feel like I'm going to call it a choice to not have children, even though it was kind of like the universe didn't give me a baby. Thank you, universe. So I'm just going to call it a choice. But like, the choice to not have a child really has opened up my ability to love, I'm going to say deeper, in my own understanding of a deeper love. My own understanding of a deeper love, again, for the people around me, for the earth, for like politics and civil rights. And I feel like I have the time, the energy that I need to be an active participant in those types of things. So yeah, I don't think that maternal instinct, although I'm sure, I don't think that it's specific to women.
Yeah, thank you, Danielle. Erin, what are your thoughts?
Oh God, this topic. I think the first thing I think of with maternal instinct is how I have these incredibly codependent family systems I work with, and how the mothers use that phrase as an excuse to not manage their own anxiety. That really is what I think of the most with this term maternal instinct, because, and of course, not being a mother, sometimes they'll challenge me in like my validity of understanding their anxiety towards their child that is struggling with addiction or whatever it is that I'm trying to lovingly teach them boundaries and detachment with love and all that kind of stuff. It gets thrown in my face. And so that's honestly what I think of. And in my experience with working with these women, it really is just an inability to be with their own emotions and their own discomfort that then gets warped and turned around into, well, I have this mother's intuition or this maternal instinct that is telling me my child is not safe and my child needs me. And it allows them to like not have to regulate and excuses controlling behavior, basically. So that honestly is more what I thought about when I first heard you guys bring up this topic. Is it just made my eyes roll because of how many times I've tried to help a client work on boundaries and detachment, and they're actually like enabling their child to death, right? By using this maternal instinct. And then on the other side of the coin, with it being a more personal thing, I think because I lacked nurturing and then was dissociated from myself and my needs and my body for so long, I remember telling a friend in high school that I thought maybe I was a boy because I didn't have that feeling. I didn't have that anxiety to take care of people or that desire to be a mother. And I think it was more just that because I wasn't connected to myself, the idea of giving that to someone else felt broken in me or something. And so for a long time, it translated into me feeling like I wasn't the same kind of woman as someone else was, and kind of actually led me to pull in really toxic females that were very codependent, but they got through the doorway with me by being this like maternal nurturing figure. Like I can think of several dysfunctional mentorship relationships or friendship relationships where the reason I hung on to them is because they gave me that maternal energy that I thought I was incapable of giving because I didn't have this maternal instinct thing that I was supposed to have. So I think by understanding that it is a myth, and, I didn't talk about this, my first career, I was a neuroscientist, and really looking at what happens physiologically and the hormones that get produced. And honestly, this is a little bit of a tangent. Seeing my brother change when he had children kind of also helped shatter that idea that it was just women, because I don't have a great relationship with my family, but I did see my brother turn into a more present and protective and nurturing father towards his children. And I was like, oh, this happens to men too. Like actually seeing it happen in someone that I knew very well. And he also was very devoid of that energy because we had the same parents. And so anyway, this is a very roundabout way of saying not only is that harmful to parents, but it was harmful to me. And even understanding, like, I thought something was wrong with me because I wasn't born with this magical maternal instinct. And what I've realized is that if I'm not connected to myself, how could I want to nurture and connect to others? And so now that I have a deep relationship with myself, I do find myself using that maternal energy with myself, with my clients, with my plant babies, with my pets. I'm very connected to nature. Like, I guess what I'm trying to say is I think the desire to protect and nurture is in all of us, and we can say that it just belongs to this one subcategory of people to maybe further the patriarchy or whatever the motivation is behind that. But I think it is human nature to want to connect, protect, guard, nurture each other. And so to simplify it and make it about being a mother, I think is harmful to everybody, like Danielle said. So
Oh, that was great. Thank you both so much. This is amazing.
That was wonderful. Thank you, Erin and Danielle, for the provocative, fantastic conversation. Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely. Oh, so great. So insightful. Can't wait for people to hear this episode. We will link to both of their websites and share their bios and more information about them on the episode page. So go check that out. And yeah.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Letters to Our Unborn Children podcast. To learn more about today's conversation, visit our podcast page at weownthistown.net/shows.
To learn more about the Letters Project or to join the private video chat group for child-free women, join our email list at letterstoourunbornchildren.com.